As soon as they started filming Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt knew right away that Groot was going to steal the show. This massive tree-like creature taught us the meaning of friendship and how many different ways Vin Diesel can say, "I am Groot." But there are a lot of things that the casual Marvel fan doesn't realize about our beloved Groot, and today we're going to talk about them. There are so many interesting facts about Groot, both within the confines of the MCU and from the comic books, but we're going to start out by letting you know that Groot's dead. No, not as a result of the decimation which occurred at the end of Infinity War. The Groot you know and loved died at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news if you didn't already know. During Guardians of the Galaxy, we saw our heroes on a crash course with seemingly no way to escape alive. That was until Groot gave up his own life to S.H.I.E.L.D. his friends and uttered the words, "We are Groot." No, we're not crying, you're crying. It's allergies, okay? It's a moving scene for the audience, and even the actors involved admitted to getting a little emotional while filming it. But in the aftermath of the Guardians' victory, we saw Rocket Raccoon holding a pot containing an adorable little baby Groot, and he even showed off some awesome dance moves. What a truly happy ending for everyone involved. Right? Well, except for Groot. Many fans believe that Baby Groot is the reincarnation of Groot, and that he simply regrew himself from the small piece of him left behind. But in actuality, Baby Groot is more like the son of Groot. They're entirely different beings, meaning the Groot we came to know and love during Guardians of the Galaxy is really and truly gone for good. We know Marvel has a history of characters not truly dying or faking their own deaths. We're looking at you, Loki. But this one has been confirmed by the Russo brothers. So while we all love the new Groot, we have to face the sad reality that the original Groot is long gone. But the good news was that at least we had a new adorable little baby Groot, who we watched grow up right before our very eyes, into a surly teenage Groot. Over the course of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Avengers Infinity War, we grew to love the new Groot as much as we did the old one. And then, of course, we got our hearts broken again when we had to bid a fond farewell to that Groot at the end of Infinity War. That movie was full of carnage, and no, not the Venom villain. Many of our favorite heroes faded into oblivion. And among all the heroes we saw perish as a result of Thanos and the Infinity Stones was Groot. Now, we'll get into this in more detail later, but you've probably guessed by now that "I am Groot" doesn't literally translate to "I am Groot." It's just the way our human brains hear the words Groot is trying to say. At the end of Infinity War, we saw Groot utter a final "I am Groot" to his pal Rocket before fading away. This scene was heartbreaking for multiple reasons, not the least of which was because Rocket had to watch all of his friends fade away into oblivion. A major plot point in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was that Rocket had trouble letting people in because he worries about being left alone. After bonding with Yondu, who also perished, Rocket was finally able to accept the love he has in his life before promptly losing it in the next movie. Although Rocket cares deeply for his fellow Guardians, his friendship with the original Groot predated all of them. These two have been through a lot together, and it's clear Rocket clung to the last thing he had left of his former friend, which just so happened to be Baby Groot. Whether it's Tony Stark and Peter Parker or Yondu and Peter Quill, we know you don't have to be biologically related to love someone as a son or as a father. In the aftermath of losing not only all of his friends, but his son, Rocket, of course, looked absolutely devastated. But don't worry, it gets a lot worse. James Gunn directed the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and he revealed what Groot actually meant to say with his final "I am Groot." Even though he was an angsty teenage Groot, his last words to Rocket was, "Dad." If you need to pause the video to grab some tissues right now, we understand. So we know that when we hear "I am Groot," it's not what the character is actually saying. Rocket and the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy seem to be able to understand him well enough, but the rest of us clearly struggle. In actuality, Groot speaks just fine, and members of his own species understand him perfectly. The larynxes of his species are stiff and hard, which affects the way their voices sound to the rest of us. So while we hear "I am Groot," that's just the way his language sounds when it comes out of his mouth. With that in mind, it's all the more impressive that he managed to make such a huge impression on movie audiences during Guardians of the Galaxy, and Baby Groot managed to practically steal the show in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. While filming the initial fight scene in the movie, Baby Groot dances around while the rest of our heroes battle a ferocious space slug. So what's Groot really saying? During the first movie, many fans couldn't tell if Rocket could really understand Groot or if he was just pretending to. But then we saw Star-Lord arguing with teenage Groot, and it seemed as though they were responding to things he couldn't have simply understood through context clues. So yes, Groot does speak a language, and his friends have learned to understand him at this point. It's mind-blowingly impressive how many different ways and in how many different languages Vin Diesel manages to say, "I am Groot." Director James Gunn wanted to make it easier for Diesel to emote his lines, despite the limited vocabulary. so he wrote out a second version of the script which contained all of Groot's dialogue translated into English. Only Gunn and Diesel were permitted to have copies of this version of the script. This means that Diesel knew what Groot was trying to convey, but the rest of the cast simply had to react to Groot as if they didn't fully understand what he was saying. In addition to his dialogue, the height of Baby Groot also posed a problem while filming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Actors Chris Pratt and Dave Bautista both stood over 6 feet tall, while Baby Groot is adorably tiny. This meant the cinematographers in charge of framing the shots had their work cut out for them. They used a 10-inch tall sculpture to stand in for Groot, and a special camera rigging designed to capture the perspective of Baby Groot while filming. Now that we've cheered you up a little bit with plenty of images of adorable Baby Groot, let's get back to talking about Avengers Infinity War. During Thor Ragnarok, we saw Thor's iconic hammer, Mjolnir, get crushed by his sister Hela. While Thor was understandably devastated by the loss, we have to admit we were also sad to say goodbye to Mjolnir. It made us think of all the good times we had together, and the time the rest of the Avengers tried to lift it during Age of Ultron. But during Infinity War, Thor needs a new weapon in order to defeat Thanos, and both Groot and Rocket follow him along to help out. One of the major themes during this movie is the idea of sacrifice. We see Thanos sacrifice Gamora in order to obtain the Soul Stone, but we also see our heroes and even villains like Loki willing to sacrifice in order to defeat Thanos. So when it came down to forge a new incredible weapon, it was clearly going to take some blood, sweat, and tears. Most of Stormbreaker is made out of special Asgardian Uru metal, which was what Mjolnir was made out of as well. But the weapon still needed a handle, one which Groot provided at great personal cost. We also saw Groot lift up Stormbreaker, which managed to shock a lot of Marvel fans. As we mentioned earlier during Age of Ultron, we just learned how challenging it was to lift up Mjolnir. Only Vision was deemed worthy enough to wield such a weapon, but that was an aspect of Mjolnir specifically, and not just because it was made out of Uru metal. Mjolnir has requirements for its bearer, but Stormbreaker doesn't, which is why Groot was able to lift it. But don't think we're not impressed with Groot at all here. Stormbreaker may not need to see your credentials in order to be wielded, but it's still a massively heavy piece of equipment. Earlier in Infinity War, Star-Lord asked Thor why he doesn't get everyone powerful armor and weaponry forged with Uru metal, if it's just so great. Thor explains that very few people in the universe are strong enough to utilize Uru metal, and would be crushed under the magnificent metal. So while wielding Stormbreaker doesn't speak to his character, it does show just how strong Groot really is. Even though we lost Groot at the end of Infinity War, the piece of him attached to Stormbreaker remains. We've seen Groot regrow himself once from a small piece of his old body, so could it be possible that it might happen again? Fans asked the Russo brothers this question during an interview, and they claim to be unsure if any portion of Groot can regrow a new one, or if it has to be a specific part. They added that it's an interesting question, but were vague on whether or not it's possible. But even if it were possible, it seems unlikely that this would be included in Avengers Endgame. After all, Stormbreaker could potentially defeat Thanos, so why tear the weapon apart because of the slim chance it could actually grow a new Groot? Besides, we bet our heroes are going to be focusing on the big picture here and figuring out how to undo the actions of Thanos during Infinity War. If they manage to accomplish that, regrowing a new Groot will be a moot point, because they would have saved the old version of him. It's not that we don't want him to come back, we just don't think growing yet another baby Groot is the way to do it. As much as we love Groot now, in his original form, he made his debut as a villain in the comic books. Created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and debuting in Tales to Astonish number 13, Groot was dubbed the Monster from Planet X, which isn't nearly as charming. Groot could actually speak in English, and sure had a lot to say about how much better he is than human beings. In fact, this monster from Planet X was such a terrible creature that Peter Parker even had nightmares about being smashed by him. It's hard to reconcile that with the Groot we all know and love, even if the new Groot does have some anger issues, per James Gunn. Once Groot becomes a hero, we learn that he's actually quite brilliant in his own language. He was trained by the Arbor Master tutors, and could give folks like Shuri and Tony Stark a run for their money. We also learned that, on his homeworld, Groot may have been royalty, and had the title His Divine Majesty King Groot the 23rd, Monarch of Planet X, Custodian of the Branch Worlds, Ruler of all the Shades. Wow, King Groot could really give Daenerys Targaryen a run for her money. In the comics, Groot's royal roots, pun intended, were called into question, and have yet to be completely disproven. In the comics, Groot was once a big part of a team of heroes, and we're not talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy. Nick Fury is known for his Avengers initiative, but that's not the only team he put together in the comics. He recruits his own S.H.I.E.L.D. monster squad, comprised of Werewolf, Vampire by Night, Gorilla Man, the Living Mummy, Sasquatch, Frank, and of course, Groot. The team was meant to fight against Merlin the Magician, but for some reason, his storyline never went anywhere. That's quite a shame, because we'd definitely love to see it play out on the big screen. Is Groot your favorite Marvel character, or do you think he's overrated? Tell us what you think in the comments section below before you rush out to buy your English to Groot translator. Then click on the subscribe button and turn on your notifications for more MCU videos from us here at CBR. Thanks for watching.